Hello, my extraordinary X-Men fans. It's Jerry Rasco, and yes, today we are talking about the X-Men. So we are going to be looking at X-Men number 13 today, the follow-up to issue number 12, featuring the first appearance of the Juggernaut. So we ended with the reveal of the Juggernaut for the first time. He's broken through all the X-Men's defenses, and now we're going to get that battle. So this is going to be a hopefully super fun and action-packed issue to review with you. Of course, I always want to take a minute to thank everybody who has been subscribing to the channel. We are making great strides towards our 1,000 subscriber goal, and that's all thanks to you. Not only for the folks who are subscribing, but then the folks who are also sharing out the channel and letting other folks know so that they can come also be subscribers and join in the fun. If you're not a subscriber yet, please consider clicking that button. It's completely free. It costs nothing to click subscribe to YouTube. It's not a membership. But to celebrate the subscribers and our goal of 1,000 subscribers, I am giving away free one-of-a-kind artwork to 6 lucky winners when we hit that 1,000 mark. So at that time, I'll pick 6 random subscribers, and they could win one of the following pieces of artwork, all celebrating the review series that we have here on the channel. So the first one we have is Spider-Man. We also have, of course, the X-Men. We have the Incredible Hulk. We have the Avengers. And then the 2 upcoming series we have are Captain America in his solo series and the Fantastic Four. So just by clicking subscribe, you could win one of these pieces of original artwork 100% for free. Even the shipping is covered. So if you've been thinking about it or you're new to the channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. The quicker we get to 1,000 subscribers, the faster this free artwork gets out into everybody's hands. So thank you so much. And with that out of the way, let's jump over and check out the comic. So here we have the cover to X-Men number 13. This is, of course, a Jack Kirby cover. It is, it's good. My notes, in fact, I said it's not bad. My biggest concern about it, to be honest, is that it is very similar to the cover that we just saw in issue number 12. We have the team. In this case, they're not all scattered to the 4 winds, but we have the Juggernaut very close in the foreground, with the team, behind, sort of everything going to a single point perspective as we close in on them. In this case, we do see the addition of the Human Torch, and surprisingly, there's no blurb. There's no trade dress on the cover saying something like featuring the Fantastic Four's fiery Human Torch or something to that effect that Stan and team were so famous for. So it does give us a little more room, which is great. The colors are bright, which is very cool. Everything pops out from the neutral gray background, so I have no problem there. My big question is, why is just the Angel so forward? One of the things I've kind of noticed in this early writing is the Angel is kind of taking a much bigger part in the action or in the forefront of the team than I had certainly remembered. I get the feeling that early on here, Stan was a big proponent of the Angel as a character, where later it kind of became a thing where what's a normal human strength guy with giant wings, like what can he do, right? He can fly around, but he's not super strong. He doesn't have laser eyes. He can't read your mind. He doesn't have claws. He doesn't have all this stuff, which of course came, is what precipitated character changes down the road. We'll see those maybe at some point. So that all said, it's a pretty good cover. Again, I'd like to have seen something maybe with a little more different direction than something so similar to what we saw in the previous issue. As I always tell you at this point, this is a scanned PDF copy of the original comic. So obviously X-Men number 13 is going to be a very pricey Silver Age issue and something that we would not be able to get to review in person. So this is an awesome opportunity. You can still find these on eBay or other websites. Marvel sold these in the early 2000s. They took a bunch of these key comics lines like X-Men, Spider-Man, etc., all the ones we're doing here, and scanned individual issues and put them onto DVDs that you could then view on your computer as PDF files. I love it. It gives us all the original formatting, the original coloring, the original ads. It's as close to having that original comic in our hands as we can get. So I do like that quite a bit. Real quick, let's talk about the creative team. We, of course, have Stan Lee still writing. We have layouts by Jack Kirby, which is, again, what we saw in the previous issue. Basically, Jack Kirby is sort of doing like storyboards for a movie, right? It's not definite every single shot, but he's giving us the through line of the visual plot of the story, how the pages would break down, probably the panel count on each page, that sort of stuff, and general figures where they're going to be. Then you have your penciler, and in this case, the penciler credit is listed as Jay Gavin. We'll get into that in a second. But then the penciler is coming in and drawing those details. So things like, how is the wreckage? What is the texture? What are the little itty bitty pieces specifically? That stuff would be drawn by the penciler and just hinted at in the layouts, right? So, and then of course we have inking by Joe Sinnott. And if you are, again, a Silver Age Marvel fan, Joe Sinnott should be a pretty recognizable name to you. Not so much on this series, but I will cover sort of his history very quickly. And when we get to the point of the Fantastic Four review series being launched, you will see Joe Sinnott a lot. So let's talk about that team. So Jay Gavin is not... I will say there may be somebody named Jay Gavin out in the world. This Jay Gavin is not a real person. Jay Gavin is a pen name for Werner Roth. So Werner Roth was doing what many, many artists at the time did, is they were going back and forth and working at both of the big two publishers, DC and Marvel Comics. And it was kind of frowned upon. It was known, like, if you're working for one side or the other, you might not get work from the other team. And to protect themselves from that, they would use pen names. So yes, I'm working for DC, but I'm going to step in and do this X-Men issue for you, but don't put my name in the credits, because otherwise I might get fired from my gig at DC. So that's what happened. So Werner Roth, let's talk about him. A penciler, longtime penciler. I say long time. Unfortunately, we'll get to the point. He did die very young. But he was working certainly in the golden and then silver age of comics. His first big work for Marvel was a book called Lorna the Jungle Girl. Basically, Stan Lee saw his work and was like, he really felt like his female figures were really powerful. And so they actually created a whole series called Lorna the Jungle Girl just to showcase Werner's artwork. From then, he also did a lot of romance books for DC, so you can kind of see, that was where his talent sort of lied. We don't have a ton of superhero books in his resume. This is one of the few that I could find. He did this X-Men issue, and then he did a lot of Westerns for Marvel. As well. So again, not the biggest superhero artist. I know I saw a quote that Roy Thomas, who was a writer, editor, I think even editor-in-chief, if I'm not mistaken, at Marvel for a while. He kind of spoke about Werner Roth and said that while he was a very good artist, his art sort of leaned more towards the personal interactions of like a romance or a drama, as opposed to maybe the action-oriented superhero books. And I think we see that in this issue as we go. Unfortunately, like I said, he did die in 1973. He was 52 years old. This comic was published in 1965. So, probably, obviously, not realizing it, nobody does, but much later in his life than some of the earlier work, right? So, glad that we have it and that we're able to talk about him and his work today. Joe Sinnott, on the other hand, Joe Sinnott had an extremely long life and was working through a great deal of that. He started with a lot of the older pre-superhero books like Strange Tales, Tales to Astonish, Tales of Suspense, those kinds of books that featured either a rotating cast of characters, monsters, horror books, you name it, right? All kinds of stuff like that. His first collaboration with Jack Kirby was a war story called Doom Under the Deep in a book called Battle. The title of the comic was just called Battle, number 69, and that's where the two of them first worked together. This led to one of the longest, if not the absolute longest, collaboration probably in comic book history with penciler and inker. I mean, he first did the cover and the interior inks on Fantastic Four number 5, which featured the first appearance of Doctor Doom, which obviously was a Jack Kirby book as well. And then he moved off of Fantastic Four for a while and was doing other things. But then he came back with issue number 44 and continued on the book with only brief gaps, maybe an issue or two here or there, until issue 231. So think about that. So 44 to 231. So we're talking about just under 200 issues. And when you're talking about one issue a month, that's a long time. Basically, he inked the Fantastic Four through 3 decades. I mean, that's an unbelievable run on a book. And, obviously what that does is it brings a consistency, even when the pencilers change, the rendering style, the inking style, all that stuff is still there, consistent, even through the course of many different artists. So Joe Sinnott, as much as we think of people like Jack Kirby as sort of the father of the Fantastic Four artistically, Joe Sinnott obviously has a huge part in that as well. So we have Joe Sinnott inking Werner Roth on this issue. So it's going to be very different, and I'm very interested to share with you, my thoughts on it. So story recap, we kind of covered that a little bit in the cover. Juggernaut, Xavier's stepbrother, has come for revenge, and he has mystical powers from the bands of Cyttorak, which have turned him into the Juggernaut. So if you're not familiar with the Juggernaut, there's lots of stuff out there from movies, comics, cartoons, toys, etc. The Juggernaut is definitely in a long-lasting character in the Marvel Universe, and of course starts here. I will talk about this real quick before we go through. I was a big cartoon fan growing up, and of course being a superhero fan as well. One of my earliest favorite cartoons was Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. It was one of the earliest ones that I had access to that featured superheroes, and of course Spider-Man being my favorite superhero, so it was right up my alley. There is an episode where Spider-Man interacts with the X-Men and the Juggernaut attacks the mansion, and there are a lot of similarities. I think there are several key plot points of this story that are essentially taken from this issue and used in that cartoon episode. It doesn't feature the original X-Men. It features the new X-Men with characters like Storm, Wolverine, etc. But there's a lot of similarities here. Obviously, Spider-Man is involved, where Spider-Man is not here in the comic. But I do recommend, if you want to try to check that out. I was going to post I was looking for a YouTube link to post in the description of this video. I could not find a link to the full episode, but if you do search Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends Juggernaut, you'll see different clips from that episode, and you'll see some of the key sequences that we're going to see here in the comic as well. So I just thought that was cool. As I was reading through, I was like, oh yeah, obviously this comic is, I'm old, this comic's even older than me. So as I was reading through, I went, oh yeah, this reminds me of that cartoon episode. And so clearly they were using this as some of the source material. So the splash page here, great. Right into the scene. Juggernaut has just broken through the last of the defenses, this steel door. The X-Men cannot stop him. It's just him and his stepbrother, Charles. And this is a great composition. I have made this mistake myself in my own comics, which is you have your figures in the very near foreground, and we're looking past them to see what they have. So I used it with like people breaking through a door and then realizing there's like a whole army there, right? And like, oops. And I did it the opposite of this, which is I was looking over the characters' heads and shoulders to that army. And I was told by a highly respected comic professional who was looking at the piece for me, and he said, you should have gone through the legs. So you have your characters big, tall in front, and then the view is through the legs. Why? Because it's a perspective issue. If you are up above looking down, then it changes as you go forward. It changes that perspective on that army or whatever they're looking at. You're really looking down at them more the further they are away. Here, we have the figure up close as a framing device, and then we can see that view between. And it actually is a more powerful composition and a better way to go. Something I should have certainly done, but that's where I learned. And so when I saw this, I went, yeah, this is exactly the right way to do it. It adds a lot of size, scale, and power to the Juggernaut figure in the foreground, which is what we wanted. We have a good overhead shot here showing the jumping us right into the story and the action, showing us what's happened. So the Juggernaut is advancing on his brother. The X-Men have been scattered as he brushed them aside, and we learn that the Juggernaut seems to have some kind of a force field. Excuse me. Now, I don't have a problem with that. We've sort of still seen that in some modern comics as they explain how the Juggernaut's powers work. I much prefer him to be strong to the point where the magic that powers him would increase his strength to the point where anything that gets in his way, once he's moving forward, he can't be stopped. That's the idea. As opposed to a force field that would push things away from him. That, to me, doesn't work as well. I'd rather have it be the physicality of the Juggernaut that accomplishes this, but again, that's just my 2 cents. I think we do find that as well with more modern interpretations of the Juggernaut, that the force field isn't sort of pushing things away. Like we saw, if you go back a few issues, we saw a character called, I'll say Eunice. I think it's Eunice, UNUS, the Untouchable, and he has a force field that repels things away from him. This is kind of like that, and again, it's not a great power. It doesn't work for me. I don't like it that much, so but that's okay. Again, good stuff with the foreground, the framing of the Juggernaut. We're looking over it. Now, this is where you want to look over his shoulder to Xavier on the ground. Puts us up high. Again, gives us a sense of the Juggernaut is towering up above Charles Xavier. So that's pretty good there. I don't have a problem with that. And then the X-Men are like, okay, well, so first Xavier is going to try to use his mental powers to stop the Juggernaut, and we learn that his helmet protects him. So not only is he invulnerable to physical attacks, but the helmet also stops him, protects him from psychic attacks as well. So Juggernaut is a very tough adversary, obviously, for the X-Men. He's been built to stop specifically them. So all they can do is sort of delay him. So combination of powers, Jean lifting the Juggernaut up in the air, and then Cyclops blasting a tunnel through the floor to drop him into, again, knowing he's not stopped, but it'll at least slow him down a little bit. So that's fine. The thing I don't really care for here is this cutaway. We see it a few times. Cutaways are great when you're doing something like, let me show you the interior structure of a building. Let me show you the interior structure of a spaceship and how the decks work and stuff like that. Having this cutaway where you see the floor and then you see this sort of ground or foundation or whatever it is, and then the character dropping through is very dull, in my opinion. It doesn't lead for action. It makes sense for blueprints and drawings and stuff like that. But in terms of an action scene, there's several different ways you could do this. Cyclops blasts this hole. We see the Juggernaut is hanging in the air, and then Marvel Girl drops him. Now, you could show it from the Juggernaut's perspective, where he's falling and you see the hole up above and you see the X-Men's faces around and you see his hands, as he's falling away. You do it the other way. You can have the top of the X-Men's heads. As we're looking down, we see the Juggernaut falling down into the hole. Either one of those angles would have been preferable to the cutaway, in my opinion. I think both are more action-oriented and are using that point of view, whether it's the X-Men's point of view or the Juggernaut's point of view. Here, again, it's just sort of, I don't know. Like I said, I love those cutaways for things. Like I said, you get like awesome starships. Like, if you're a big Star Trek fan or Star Wars fan, they'll do those diagrams where they cut, it's like they take the spaceship and they'll cut, horizontally or vertically through it so you can see the layout and all the technology. Stuff is really, really cool, but not for action like this. So they've delayed. Xavier's got a plan. So his plan is to boost his own mental powers. So he's got a device that he needs to finish. It wasn't done. He gets it finished, and it will intensify his brain waves and his power to see if that can penetrate the helmet and stop the Juggernaut. So plot-wise, I've got a problem with this, which is you don't need this. You will see plot-wise, this whole part of taking all this time, building a machine, boosting his mental energies, really doesn't come into play. The other piece that I don't like about this page, and more going on, and this is kind of a throughput through the entire issue, but this is where it really dawned on me as I was reading through. There are little to no backgrounds in most of the issue. So what happens is when you don't, people get this confused all the time. I hear these comments from fans online all the time when they talk about, artists that don't draw backgrounds. They feel like if an artist, the more lines that are on the paper, the more work the artist did, the more valuable that work is, or the more impressive it is. Maybe so. I'm not saying you don't need to draw everything in every background. Like this, the panels here in 3 and 4 of Xavier with the helmet on and the brain waves and stuff, it's fine. This one where the brain, his mental call is going out across the city and you've got this sort of very simple city background, that's fine too. Where I have problems are like the first two panels. The Beast is walking on his hands, carrying equipment with his feet, but he's floating in the air. There's a very simple thing. You don't even have to change the color. A simple line in through here showing the edge of a wall and the floor establishes a floor. He is just floating in air. The other part over here is kind of similar. You have this weird angle. It's supposed to be some sort of a hallway. But then there's a corner here which doesn't line up with the corner over there. So the whole thing is sort of slanted, like it's, I don't know, maybe it's a curved wall. It's very, from a geometry standpoint of an actual room, it makes no sense. They're just these green walls. There's one random line here. Is that a door? Like, what is that? Is it just molding on the floor? If you, even in a house like I have, where you just, you have kind of basic sheetrock walls, there are things like there's molding on trim work and around doors. Doors often have inserts and handles and hinges, and this is supposed to be an old mansion, so you would have more woodwork, more stuff. It's just a matter of creating the space they're in, and this is just too vague for me. So I find that a lot. There's very little attention paid to the actual backgrounds in most of this comic. And that, for me, it does bother me. I don't need a perfect architectural drawing. I don't need things to be era accurate or whatever crazy stuff like that. I just want a little bit to help establish that space so that Beast isn't floating in the air, right? I will say this, the Iceman icy form is very good. In the previous issue, I didn't talk about it too much. I did not care for the way it was drawn by Alex Toth. Alex Toth obviously is a great artist, but I don't think he had a feel for how the faceted nature of Iceman, like where to have more organic lines, where to be more harder ice, and here it seems to be captured pretty well. I think this is a pretty good depiction of Iceman in this issue. Great transition here on a page turn. That is excellent. Good job. Talk about that a lot. You absolutely want to have your scene transition. So we go from Xavier and what he's working on back to the Juggernaut, and we got a couple things. So one, the page turn is the easiest way to change scenes. We're talking to character A, we want to go to character B, do it when the reader turns the page. Perfect. The other thing you do is they're talking about him, and he mentions time to get back to that hole in the floor. It will not stop Juggernaut's attack much longer. Boom. We're back in the hole to the Juggernaut. So you have a thematic change, meaning the theme of what we're going to see has been established in the previous page. So 2 out of 3 ways that you can transition a scene from one to the other is excellent. So really good job. Now we get back to that cutaway again. And again, it doesn't work for me. I understand what is happening here. And the Juggernaut is smashing, handholds into, I guess, the bedrock, the foundation, whatever, so that he can climb up. No problem with the concept of how is he going to get out of the hole that they dropped him into. Here's what I would prefer. Show the Juggernaut smashing his hand into the wall or gripping his fingers into the wall. Then you do a down shot through the hole of him looking up as he's climbing, just digging into the wall of the tunnel. That's the easiest way to do it instead of this very boring profile cutaway. And this is interesting, right? He tunnels underneath Cyclops and pops back out. Get it? So that's one way you can show this. But again, it's just it's not the most dramatic or exciting way to do it. And I can think of a couple of different ways I think would be better. I do like, so panel 1, looking kind of down, slight down shot to Juggernaut at the bottom of the hole. That's a good image. And then as he pops up through the ground right underneath Cyclops, knocking him into the air, that's a great image as well. You've got this great breaking of the floor, Cyclops flying off, and Angel reacting. That's terrific. That is a really good panel. These ones in between of the side scrolling, it's like watching somebody play Dig Dug. If you're too young to know what Dig Dug is, Google Dig Dug. Great video game, but it's literally a guy digging in this sort of cutaway image through the ground. So Juggernaut is out of the hole and back on the attack, and here we have a problem with scale. So Cyclops is bigger than the Juggernaut in this image. He's not as chubby, he's not as thick. I'll give him that. The Juggernaut has got like one shape body. It's just a tube. Would not have been bad to give him a little bit of form, but okay. But I mean, Cyclops, like, his head is larger than the Juggernaut's head. He's as tall, if he's standing up, he's as tall, if not taller, than the Juggernaut. Same with Angel. Angel is as big as the Juggernaut. We've established that he's a large character, and later we'll see that. Spoilers, but I mean, we're going to look at it. He fights the Beast here coming up, and we can see how much bigger the Juggernaut is than the Beast. So yeah, it's just one of those things where scale is really bad. Be consistent with that. It's important, especially when you have a character like the Juggernaut that relies so much on being a powerful character. All right, so sorry about the edit there. I realized after going away is that my audio had cut out, so I had to clip where it had cut off and then come back in. But we were talking about the scale of the Juggernaut in comparison to Cyclops and Angel. Like, it does not make a lot of sense to have this character that's supposed to be so big, so strong, the same size or smaller, these normal-sized human beings, and then also have them try to hold him up by tackling, kicking, and punching him. Doesn't work for me. So next we have a scene transition, which is not a great transition. We go from this fight to all of a sudden there's an airplane. What does this have to do with anything? Well, we find out through the narration that people are picking up on Professor X's mental brain waves, even though that's not what he's trying to do. So the supercharging of his brain is causing other people to hear stuff. So there's pilots and people on the plane are hearing stuff. The Teen Brigade, Rick Jones's radio conglomeration of teenagers, they're hearing it, but not through the radio. Even Daredevil in his Matt Murdock persona is hearing it while in court. Again, it doesn't impact the plot at all. I don't think we need these. And we'll see pretty quick, if you get rid of these panels, you could have a cleaner transition from Cyclops and Angel fighting the Juggernaut back to Xavier working on the machine and talking to the rest of the team. That's a lot cleaner. You also have more room later for panels that are maybe drawn fairly small that could be a lot bigger. So one of the things that I did talk about while the audio had cut out was the size of panels. So again, if you haven't seen this in one of the other videos, or you're unfamiliar with the original art of comics are drawn much larger. Comic books are actually drawn on 11 by 17 paper with a sort of border around the outside to where it's actually the work is done in a 10 1/4 by 15 inch space. So if you figure that it's a little over 10 inches wide and 15 inches tall, that means that these are like 5 inches a piece. So when you have these small panels here, like in the right-hand page at the top, these are 5 by 5 inches by 5 inches of original art. And just to give you an idea, 5 inches, I use here's a regular envelope for scale. So you have some scale here. So we'll cut to me real quick. You'll see they have a regular envelope. 5 inches is about this big, so it's not quite half of this envelope, or pretty close to it, and slightly wider than the envelope. So if you take, about, sorry, I'm trying to do everything backwards on the screen here, like that right here is about 5 by 5. Like that's how big the original art space is to draw all these characters and figures in a small panel. If you can economize by getting rid of things that are not crucial to the plot, telling things in fewer panels, it gives you larger panels and more options in your page layout. The other thing here, so Xavier is charging his brain, and while he can't run away because they have to draw a line in the sand to fight the Juggernaut, he also keeps Marvel Girl back with him, and I don't understand why. Again, it's something that never comes up in the plot. He's like, I need you, but real spoilers, short of her just wheeling him back to the Juggernaut, she really doesn't do anything critical. So why not let her go? I'm sure Professor X can wheel himself around in the house. I mean, right? So that's an issue. The other thing here is the backgrounds. We talked about it before. The lack of background in these cases really does hurt. The Beast is sort of floating up in this just orange background. There's no floor, there's no ceilings. Everything is just this base orange color. And so he's just floating out there. Excuse me, sorry about that. Whew, sneeze. So Beast is floating around out there, and then on top of it, it's sort of, the angle is bad. It's not quite a true tangent, but it almost looks like he's balancing on this sort of ice, what Xavier calls an ice club or frozen club that Iceman has. That's bad. And part of the problem with that, if we zoom in, you'll see the hand. And this is where I talk about hands are so important. Your characters, yes, your characters may have fists a lot when they're fighting, punching, etc. But the rest of the time, they're going to be if you want to have them be regular people, they're going to be handling things. They're going to be like me. They're going to talk with their hands and express with their hands a lot. And so you need to be able to draw hands. The eyes for sure are the window to the soul for your personality of the character. This image of the beast, getting those eyes right is really important. When you can't see the eyes, the hands are super important. So here, he's supposed to be holding, I guess it's supposed to be the idea of like a frozen club or bat that he's going to hit the Juggernaut with. Well, he's not really holding it. It's sort of here, it's like this, and it's sort of stuck to his hand because as far out as that hand is, there's no way he's wrapping his hand around anything to grab it. When you do that, your fingers tend to splay out. There's tension in your hand. You have to accommodate for the space. Even if you grab like a, right? I'll grab this ruler like it's a sword. My fingers don't close around all the way the same they would in a fist, right? So you have to accommodate for that space of the object in the hand, and that's definitely not what's happening here with Iceman. So that's problematic in regards to the hand and how that should be done. So practice your hands. Very, very important. Can't emphasize that enough. If you are a new artist and wanting to get into comics, hands are critical. So they continue to fight. And again, the staircase is this emphasis. I don't know why the beast didn't come down. Oh, actually, sorry. We haven't gotten there yet. My bad. So as the audio stuff. So they're heading towards this staircase. This is the part where they're trying to fight him off. And again, Cyclops is back to using his optic blast, which isn't working. I do like that in this case, we have zoomed out a little bit. It's not too different from panel to panel, but they've gone ahead. The art team here of Werner Roth and Joe Sinnott have just blacked out the costumes. I like that. I always think of the costumes as black with yellow over the top. I think it's a more striking, dramatic look. But when you have solid black like this without any kind of highlight, it also makes it very hard to add shadows around and depth. Everything is just a black void. If you butt up against shadows, they blend all together. So that's typically why you use a color like a blue. At this time, in terms of the printing technology of the time, it was much more consistent to be shades of blue than shades of gray. So therefore, it's just a lot easier to go with the blue with dark shadows instead of black. But anyway, I like it. I think they should do that more. That's just, again, my 2 cents. I like here, now we get the Juggernaut does look a little bit bigger. He's kind of hulking as he's heading towards Cyclops. And then Iceman freezes up the stairs to disrupt his footing. Great. Good strategy. I dig it. I have no problem with the ice on the stairs. I think that makes a lot of sense. This is a good transition. Here we have a page turn transition. This is great. We've cut to Johnny Storm of the Fantastic Four hanging out with his friends, talking about race cars, and he overhears Professor Xavier's mental contact. But being that he's a superhero, he kind of knows what it is, but he doubts it because he's worried it could be a trap. And fair enough for you, Johnny. Way to be smart for characters maybe not known for being cautious that much. So there we go. Now, again, we'll get to the end, and I'm spoiling it. The Human Torch, we saw it on the cover. The Human Torch is going to get involved here. I don't think it's necessary. It doesn't really do much for the plot. It's not critical to how the book ends. It just, he's there. And, imagine if you didn't have the Fantastic Four or Johnny Storm collaboration here, you could cut out a lot of this stuff and, again, start having, like on this next page, this is my big concern. When this panel is 5 by 5, 5 inches by 5 inches, that's extremely small. And when it is extremely small like that, you don't have room to show the silhouette of the Juggernaut exploding out of that ice, making the ice fling everywhere, show Cyclops getting hit, having it smash into the wall, knocking Iceman down. Instead, we get a much smaller drawing, partially covered by dialogue because we don't have the room to work. This whole, again, we'll see it. You tell me in the comments, was was Johnny Storm. What if Johnny Storm had never shown up? Could things have ended the same way? My argument is yes. I do like Iceman freezing up the Juggernaut in a block of ice to try to contain him. As Cyclops says, it's delaying actions. That is perfectly fine. I have no problem with that. And then the magic that powers him helps him to break out of the ice, not just his physical strength. Again, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that the same way I do with some of the other stuff that they've shown the Juggernaut doing, like pushing Professor X backwards in a chair just by this magical force field he has. I don't like that. I do want to point out Jean Grey, Marvel Girl's chin here is awfully big. Yeah, for somebody who, the penciler, as I mentioned, Werner Roth, his, he was known, he got an entire book created just for him, Lorna the Jungle Girl, because Stan Lee was so impressed with the way that he drew women. I would assume that he would do better than this and cut that chin down quite a bit. She's got a massive Jay Leno chin there, and it's a very simple thing to fix. So, that's that. Now, we get to a bigger panel here, which is great. And I just want to talk about a couple of things real quick. I like Cyclops' body language on the banister of the stairs. He's been using his optic blasts. He's been hit by this ice. He's literally tackled the Juggernaut, a thing that mystically cannot be stopped. He's exhausted. Beast bounds in from the doorway. This is my problem. I don't understand why you wouldn't have him coming down the stairwell, since the stairwell seemed to be the focus of the Juggernaut's direction, right? So why isn't the Beast coming from there? Because putting this doorway in here, the geometry of the space does not work at all. The doorway, this is a plane, right? This orange that the doorway is in, that is a plane that's facing us. Then there's this other component over here, and there's a ceiling part. So this part has to be so if this is the plane of the door, the wall that Cyclops' arm is overhanging has to be at an angle like this to the door, either going away from us or coming at us. But that means Cyclops' arm is closer than the door, but where did the stairs go? The wall here would say that is closer to us than this line, but the stair banister is here. So just the whole geometry of the space does not work at all, and it makes no sense. And then the last thing I'll add here is a real miss on the coloring department for these chunks of ice. You can see, I don't know if they were added after what happened. You can see the lines, like the background lines were drawn, and somebody went, oh, let's add some ice chunks in here. Didn't color over the top, so you see the transparency. Now, I mean, you could go, it's transparent ice. Fair enough. But all the other ice is colored white and blue, and you don't see through it. So having the lines through it just makes it look, I don't know, amateurish, I'll say. I'll argue that. Oh, one more question, and I want to hear drop a comment and let me know. Did you notice Iceman laying in the rubble of the ice right there? Let me know if you did or didn't before I mentioned it. He blends in perfectly. And how do you fix this? So obviously he is made of ice. He's surrounded by ice. I get it. There's a couple of things you could do. One is changing up the ink style. So yes, he is covered in ice, and these are chunks of ice blocks. This line work rendering these thin, long lines, take them off of him. Make his body more icy, and maybe work on more of the anatomy structure, so you're doing more lines inside. So instead of soft, curvy lines for his spine, maybe have those be a little harder, but take away these angled hatch lines, which blend in with the same angled hatch lines as the ice. That's one way to do it. The other inking way you could do it is with a halo. So I've talked about that in other series. Basically, a halo is you take the black contour line that outlines Iceman, and anywhere it contacts more black ink, you put a halo around it, so that there's a little gap between Iceman and those shadows. That will help his figure pop out better. And then the last thing, of course, is color. Why don't you make him bright white, make the ice a little more blue? or vice versa. Either way works. But just the way it is right now, it blends in really, really well. And it took me several readings before I recognized, oh wait, that's Iceman laying there in the ice rubble in the foreground. So again, drop a comment. Let me know. Did you see Iceman laying there before I mentioned it, or did you notice once I pointed it out? I like the Beast bouncing around, using his agility. Again, here scale. On one hand, the Juggernaut's huge, and the next thing you know, as Beast is kicking him in the back, the Beast's feet are as long as, like, from the Juggernaut's butt up to sort of the middle of his back. And I know the Beast has big feet, but then you have to draw his head and the rest of his body smaller. I mean, if he's standing, he's not much shorter than the Juggernaut. And then all of a sudden, it changes, and he's in his scale, and the Juggernaut is much, much bigger. And then as we get to the next page, now we really get to see that scale again. Huge hand, even bigger than the Beast's hands, which are large, proportionally. The head is bigger. This is the scale of the Juggernaut you want to see. That makes sense. Over here on the left, not so much. The Beast's leg gets injured, but he's still agile enough with his hands and his remaining good leg to escape and lead the Juggernaut into charging into the danger room. Again, great strategy. Bring them to the danger room where there's lots of danger. And if nothing else, again, hopefully enough distractions to slow him down. So in some of the action stuff, again, I agree. I don't think Werner Roth's pencils are as powerful as they could be. But when you have this, there's another one coming up that shows a person physically struggling. We see Cyclops, like I mentioned, on the stairwell there on the banister, kind of slumped over. That physical strain is really, really good, and I like it quite a bit, and he does a great job with that. And we see that here with the Beast. His leg is injured, his body is beat up, but he's still able to get over to the danger room controls and start it up and have everything attack the Juggernaut at once. So that's great. However, it does not last long. The Juggernaut is easily able to smash everything up. He's invulnerable, so anything that hits him doesn't hurt. And then the Beast drops a 10-ton barrel of steel. Now this, again, I don't care for. This is where, right, the Juggernaut's not doing anything. It looks like he's almost falling over backwards, and the 10 tons of momentum stops because his force field is repelling it and pushes it back towards the Beast. I'd rather the Juggernaut just reach out with his hand and just stop it. That's more impressive to me, right? Imagine you send this thing that would crush anybody, and he just stops it with one hand and rolls it back at you, maybe kicks it back at you. That is some intimidating power, as opposed to my magic force field pushes it to you. You might as well be, like I mentioned in the past, I think, the character we saw a few episodes ago, Eunice the Untouchable with the repelling force field. It's basically the same thing. And I thought that character was lame. I thought it was kind of a lame mutant power. This is the same thing. I have no problem with the mystic energy, meaning like the Juggernaut could survive fire or underwater or outer space. If he had to, again, maybe melt the ice blocking him, stuff like that. But when it comes to physical feats, I want the Juggernaut to be using his brawn. And I think, again, that's a more modern take, and we see that today. Johnny Storm finally gets the communication from Xavier, understands what's going on, and goes, okay, and then takes off. And that's great. But again, I just kind of go, why? I don't have a problem with the Human Torch being here. It, again, establishes the X-Men are part of the greater Marvel universe. There's always cross-promotion, let's be honest. That Stan loved to cross-promote and put characters like the Human Torch in lots of books. So you see him in Spidey books and, you name it, the Avengers and all kinds of stuff. However, I just don't feel like he really moves the plot forward. And you'll see that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments if you agree or don't agree. So there we go. So Xavier has done as much as he can. His brain is as charged as it could be. He's got the Human Torch coming because he thinks he's going to help him, and off they go. Now, compared to the Jean Grey, the Marvel girl with the big chin. This is a very nice image here. This is drawn well. The facial features are very nice. The body language is good. She's, that's a very good female figure. Where certainly there are plenty of artists who struggle with that, and so this is very nice. And then we have again the big hulking Juggernaut, big in scale, big in size. This is what he should be, right? This big, massive power. But Marvel Girl again is able to temporarily, at least, hold him up off the ground. So the Juggernaut's deal is the mystical powers of Cyttorak mean once he starts moving, nothing can stop him. Well, what if you stop him from moving? Meaning pick him up and hold him off the ground. Where is he going to go? So that's great. And then here comes the Human Torch, which is perfectly fine. He attacks the Juggernaut, and this is where Juggernaut's protected from the fire. Great, no problem. So and basically Xavier tells him, all I want you to do is just confuse him, keep him busy. You're a distraction. Why the Human Torch? Why didn't Marvel Girl, throw things at him telekinetically? Why doesn't Xavier wake Cyclops up and get him to keep blasting Juggernaut in the face to blind him and distract him with your optic beams? It doesn't have to stop him. You don't have to go full power. Just distract him. Angel. So then he calls out to Angel. He's going to need him. And why didn't he do that earlier and have the Angel fly around and keep him occupied? It just seems, again, the Human Torch isn't necessary for the plot. If he doesn't show up, we find another way to do it, and it's not the end of the world. Remember I mentioned hands, that struggling body. This is Angel, getting up. He's been beat up, stunned, knocked out, whatever. Xavier calls for him, and that's great. You see those hands pressing, straining to get up, to get to the ground. That's a really nice image there. That part's really good. Now, Human Torch uses his flame power to blind temporarily, flash blind the Juggernaut, and then now the Angel again swoops around him and, keeps him occupied. Again, why? You've blinded him, and the whole point here is to distract him, blind him, and then the Angel's going to swoop in, as we see on the right-hand page, and pull the loosened helmet off. The Beast had loosened the helmet while he was struggling with Juggernaut, and now Angel's going to swoop in and pull it off. Why? Okay, you got the Human Torch. Juggernaut can't see. Great. Now pull the helmet off. Why spend an extra 4 panels flying around, swooping around? Juggernaut's still trying to grab him. He can hear him. He can feel him flapping around him. He's trying to grab the Angel, and then he swoops down from above and pulls the helmet off. Again, wasted space. Why don't we have bigger panels here so that this final confrontation between Cain and Xavier, the stepbrothers, why isn't that a way bigger image? Give me the big striking image. This where Xavier blasting his mental power and the Juggernaut rearing back as it's hitting him in the head. Give me, half a page of that. We have space to do it if we cut out some of this stuff that means nothing to the plot. And then, I complained about it earlier. What was the point of Xavier supercharging his brain? I think when I first read it, I was like, oh, he's going to try to overpower the protection that Cain has from the helmet. Well, you took the helmet off. So once his helmet's off, he's vulnerable. You don't need a giant amount of power. Xavier even says, this is the smallest part of my power. And yes, it takes a couple times, we'll see here, to stop Cain because his rage and his hate is so strong. But he didn't need to supercharge his brain. He could have called out to Human Torch, even if you want to include the Human Torch. Xavier sending a mental image to the Human Torch is not crazy. It's within the scope of what we've seen him do. And then now you have an unshielded mind. He can knock out his stepbrother easily. He even says, this is the smallest part of my power. Crazy. So the whole thing, all this stuff in here, all this stuff of him supercharging his brain, all the Human Torch stuff, this stuff down here, this whole section here, the area of the gone. It's not needed. It never comes into play. I'll argue half the story is irrelevant to how the actual plot goes. Right? You could either tell the story in half the pages, or you could make all the imagery you do keep twice as big. And I'm always a big fan of bigger panels, bigger action. It is good framing to have the struggling, again, hands, right? The struggling, straining hands. He won't quite give up. He's reaching for his stepbrother before Charles gives him the coup de grace and knocks him out finally. Interesting now. He does, I don't know how. Xavier says without the helmet, authorities will be able to keep him in confinement. How? The only way that you could do it was your mental powers. We don't know anybody else that has mental powers. Just because his helmet's off, the rest of his body is still the Juggernaut. It's not like you can sedate him. Gas, we saw gas doesn't work. Electricity doesn't work. Like, I don't know how he expects the authorities will confine him. That seems crazy. But we'll see. And then Xavier removes the experience from the Human Torch from his brain because he doesn't, I don't know why. I guess he doesn't want the Fantastic Four to know where the X-Men live. If you can't trust the Fantastic Four, who can you trust, right? So that seems crazy. Why bother with that? Just go, thanks, Johnny. Johnny takes off and tells the gang, oh my gosh, you guys wouldn't believe it. The X-Men are cool. I helped them out. I hope we don't have to fight this Juggernaut guy. Maybe Ben could go toe-to-toe with him. I don't understand why you wipe his memory. And now all the X-Men except for Jean are injured. And this I thought was terrible. So they make jokes about how she's going to be their nurse. So Jean, we've seen Jean as a cook. We've seen Jean as a nurse, even so far as to be wearing like a white nurse's uniform. That is terrible. Did not age well at all, like sour milk. So yeah, but that's how it ends. And a little joke about how everybody is going to have to pitch in once they're feeling better. Because they did such a good job, everybody's going to have to pitch in and fix up the mansion. And there we go. And that's the end of the book. So, whew, a big one. Let's cut over let's wrap things up. So there we go. There's X-Men number 13. And again, I apologize for some of the edits that are going on there. Like I said, I had partway through my audio cut out. I started re-recording and again realized I had no audio. So had to kind of restart there. So thank you for bearing with me through some awkward edits. But overall, here we go. A big issue. We had the reveal of the Juggernaut in 12, but now the first battle. There was some cool stuff. There was some stuff that did not work for me. Because it's important, it's the Juggernaut. And like I said, so much of this issue, I feel like was adapted to the Amazing Spider-Man episode with the Juggernaut and the X-Men. It really just has a nostalgia feel for me. So in terms of a ranking, I would give this one I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Pure artwork, probably more of like a 6, but with that nostalgia feel and the key element being the first fight of the Juggernaut, I'm going to give it a 7. So as always, like I mentioned a few times, I'm very interested in hearing your thoughts about the issue, about the art, about the characters, all those good things. Drop your comments. I do check them out for every video, so please leave me a comment. I appreciate it so much. And of course, don't forget, hit that subscribe button and join me right back here next week with even more X-Men. Thanks.